LinkedIn influencers, the top thought leaders in business, revealed their best career mistakes on LinkedIn. Well, joining me now for the highlights is a Professional Network Site's senior editor, Francesca Levy. And Francesca, you had quite some colorful contributions coming in from these influencers. Tell us about Sallie Krawcheck, who's been with us.
Absolutely. What I love about this story is that it's not one of these stories you necessarily learn a lesson from. It's just one of these cringeworthy moments you never forget. She had a cat who she was hosting the president of the Bank of America, CEO of Bank of America, in her home for a very high-profile event.
Okay.
Her cat decided to climb a staircase so that she was poised just at the level of the CEO's shoulder and then begin to do some untoward things. Next to the
clean itself, right? Or something like
clean
that?
Herself.
Okay.
This cat also had some interesting physical quirks to begin with. You can see a picture of him on LinkedIn, or her. She's sweet but a little unusual looking. And Sallie Krawcheck says she'll never forget it. It wasn't necessarily something she learned from, but it's something she can laugh at when she looks back on her long career.
Well, you can always count on Sallie to have one or two quirky stories, and she's not afraid to put it out there.
No.
Okay, David Kerpen from Likeable Media. What's this about the reality program Paradise Island?
Yeah, do you remember this show?
Barely.
It was one of the early sort of sensational reality shows. I'm not sure exactly what the premise was, but it had to do with love triangles. He went on there and became, he lasted almost till the end of the series, became the villain on the show, and was just, this was before the era of real social media taking off and really spreading rumors about people, but there were still message boards on, Fox.com, and he got called a lot of interesting things, and he learned from that not everyone's going to like you, and that's okay.
Interesting. All right. Well, and we have on the phone another influencer who wrote his worst day at the office, which is Nick Thompson, our Bloomberg contributor. Nick, I loved your piece where you talked about how your first job was getting hired as a producer on 60 Minutes, and you said that you didn't last more than 60 minutes at 60 Minutes.
No, I was fired almost immediately. I showed up and I went into one meeting, and then the executive producer pulled me into his office and said, "Who are you?" I said, "I'm the new associate producer." He said, "Show me your resume." Looked at my resume and fired me on the spot. Just decided I wasn't qualified enough right then and there.
Well, I don't get that. When I read this, I was like, I don't get this, Nick. Weren't you vetted by the producers there? I mean, how did you walk in? How did they even let you in the building then?
I had not been vetted at the highest levels, and I think when you're a young person, you're hired to a good job, one very important lesson to learn is to not show up at work on a skateboard. About 15 years later, I talked to somebody from the show, and they said, "Oh, my God, I remember you. You showed up on the skateboard." So just be a little careful.
All right. I don't think you show up on skateboards anymore, but, Nick, you said you learned a valuable lesson after that, though, right?
Well, I mean, what happened to me is that I was then suddenly adrift. I mean, this is maybe 6 months after graduation or 4 months after graduation. I had nothing to do. I had known I was going to do this job for a long time. One of my best friends was going to Africa for a long time, just doing a trip before starting graduate school. So I just went with him, and I spent the next 4 or 5 months wandering around West Africa, taking buses. It was actually where I published my first stories, international reporting, and I learned some great stuff. I got to do an adventure that I wouldn't have a chance to do at any other point in my life. And I think it ended up being an extremely valuable experience.